The small briefing room was filled with tension. Officers and strategists crowded around the long table, their eyes fixed on a woman standing at the front. She had been part of the team for years, but today she was here with an idea that made most of them uncomfortable. Her hands gripped the edges of the table as she laid out the plan, voice steady, eyes sharp with focus. She had spent nights thinking about this, running every scenario in her mind. She knew it was risky, but she also knew it was the only way. The room fell quiet as she spoke. She described an enemy force moving faster and smarter than anyone had expected. Satellites had tracked unusual movements, and intelligence reports painted a grim picture. Entire towns were at risk if the attack succeeded. She had studied the maps, calculated the timings, and considered every possible defensive strategy. What she proposed was bold. She wanted to take an old, weathered plane, one everyone else had dismissed as outdated, and use it to intercept the attack before it could reach its target. There was a murmur in the room. Some leaned back in their chairs, shaking their heads. Others exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. A senior officer finally cleared his throat, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "Do you really think that plane can handle this?" he asked, scanning the technical report she had prepared. "It's not even equipped with modern targeting systems. It's decades old. The risk is too high." She met his gaze without hesitation. "I know it's old," she said, "but I've flown it in situations far worse than this. It's fast, it's agile, and I know it better than any other aircraft we have. If we act quickly, I can reach the enemy before they reach us. This is the only chance we have to stop them in time." A younger officer snorted softly, shaking his head. "That's a suicide mission," he said. "You'll be walking into a trap. We have newer planes with better weapons and faster response times. Why would we risk a relic?" Her jaw tightened, but she didn't answer immediately. She had heard doubts like this before. She had faced them countless times in her career, and each time she had proven herself. She knew words alone would not convince them. She needed action, not discussion. Still, she persisted, explaining every angle, every contingency. She drew lines on the map, pointed to timing sequences, and described how she could exploit the enemy's weak points. Her voice was calm but urgent, every word chosen carefully to show that she had thought of everything. The senior officer leaned back, rubbing his temples. "It's too risky," he said again, more firmly this time. "We can't approve this plan. We have protocols, procedures. We have to follow standard operations. This is reckless." The woman felt a flash of frustration, but she swallowed it. She had expected resistance. She had prepared for this. Still, hearing it aloud was difficult. Years of experience, careful planning, and unwavering determination dismissed in a few words. She took a deep breath, letting it settle. The stakes were too high to argue now. She had to find another way. As the meeting continued, she stayed quiet, listening to other officers discuss alternative plans. They debated logistics, supply lines, and troop movements, but none of their strategies addressed the urgency she had identified. None of them had the timing, the speed, or the precision needed to stop the attack. She realized with a sinking feeling that if she didn't act, the people in those towns would pay the price. After the meeting, she walked out into the cool evening air, letting the tension fall away for a moment. The base was quiet, shadows stretching across the tarmac. She looked at the old plane parked in its hangar, the one everyone said was too old for combat. Its metal surface was scratched and worn, but to her it was a trusted companion. She ran her hand along the wing, remembering the countless hours she had spent in its cockpit, the maneuvers she had perfected, the tests she had passed. She knew every lever, every gauge, every quirk. It was not just a machine, it was an extension of herself. She knew what she had to do. If the commanders wouldn't approve the plan, she would have to act on her own. She thought about the families in the towns, the people who were unaware of the danger heading toward them. She thought about the soldiers in the field, counting on someone to act fast. And she thought about herself, knowing that fear was natural but courage was necessary. Her preparation began quietly. She didn't announce it to anyone, didn't seek permission. She checked every system, reviewed old flight manuals, and ran simulations in her mind. Every calculation had to be precise. Every move had to be deliberate. She double-checked fuel levels, weapon systems, and communication lines. Every detail mattered because one mistake could cost lives, not just her own, but everyone depending on her. As night fell, she climbed into the cockpit of the old plane, the familiar smell of fuel and metal grounding her. The engine roared to life under her hands. a comforting sound that reminded her of every challenge she had faced and overcome. She went through the pre-flight checklist with methodical precision. The plane responded exactly as she expected. Every dial, every control in harmony with her experience. She smiled briefly, feeling a sense of connection, a reminder that she was ready for what was to come. Even though she was alone in her resolve, she felt a quiet determination that steadied her nerves. This was more than a mission. It was a statement that experience, skill, and courage could overcome doubt. That one person, if committed enough, could make a difference. She knew that some would never understand her decision, but she also knew that some decisions were not about approval. They were about necessity. As she stepped out of the cockpit to finish final preparations, she took one last look at the hangar, at the familiar equipment, at the place where she had spent years training and learning. The wind brushed against her face, carrying the distant hum of activity across the base. Somewhere in the world, people were unaware that their lives would soon depend on someone willing to take a risk they could not imagine. She felt the weight of that responsibility settle on her shoulders, but instead of fear, she felt clarity. Her plan was dismissed. Her idea was rejected, but she had something no one could take away: her skill, her courage, and her unwavering commitment to act when it mattered most. And that, she knew, was all she needed to begin. After the plan was rejected, she knew she could not wait for approval. Time was slipping away, and every second mattered. The enemy was moving closer, and the towns they were targeting had no idea of the danger heading toward them. She returned to the hangar late at night, the base quiet except for the faint hum of distant generators. The old plane sat under the dim lights, its surface reflecting years of use. Everyone else saw a relic, but she saw potential, a trusted ally that could make the impossible possible. She began inspecting every part of the aircraft with meticulous care. The mechanics had long ago declared it unfit for modern combat, but she refused to accept that judgment. Every wire, every engine component, every piece of metal had to be perfect. She spent hours checking the hydraulics, oil lines, and fuel systems, making small adjustments with the precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times. She whispered to herself as she worked, not out of superstition, but because she had learned long ago that confidence in her own hands mattered as much as the machine she was fixing. It was not easy. Parts were worn, some systems outdated, and repairs required improvisation. She scavenged supplies from the base, adapting modern components to fit an old frame. Many nights she stayed past midnight, hunched over the engine, hands covered in grease, sweat mixing with determination. She refused to let the aircraft's age become a weakness. Every challenge was an opportunity to prove that experience and skill could overcome limitations. She did not have official support, but she had allies. A few trusted colleagues, people who had witnessed her skill over the years, quietly offered guidance. They did not ask questions. They simply provided what she needed: tools, advice, a pair of hands to steady a stubborn part. They did not share her vision entirely, but they believed in her ability to achieve the impossible. She valued that trust more than anything else. She knew that in the air it would be just her, but their quiet support on the ground was invaluable. As she worked, she thought constantly about the enemy. Reports indicated their forces were larger and more advanced than anyone had anticipated. Conventional defenses were unprepared, and time was running out. She studied maps late into the night, memorizing terrain, calculating flight paths, and considering every possible move the enemy might make. She visualized herself in the cockpit, running through maneuvers, adjusting for wind, speed, and visibility. Each simulation in her mind brought her closer to readiness. Sleep was a rare commodity. Some nights she would sit on the edge of the hangar, staring at the old plane, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Fear was there, natural and insistent, whispering that she was taking on too much, that failure would have catastrophic consequences. But she never allowed fear to dominate. She reminded herself that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Each decision, each adjustment to the plane was a small act of courage, a preparation for the moment she would face the enemy alone. She tested every system multiple times. The landing gear, which others had called unreliable, responded perfectly after her adjustments. The engine roared with renewed strength, and the controls moved with the precision she had trained for over countless flights. She made mental notes, running through checklists again and again, ensuring that nothing was left to chance. Her confidence grew, not from arrogance but from preparation. from knowing that she had done everything possible to control the uncontrollable. Days passed in a blur of repairs, calculations, and quiet observation. She watched satellite images, analyzed reconnaissance reports, and predicted enemy movements. The town she aimed to protect seemed farther away than ever, yet she felt closer to it in purpose. She imagined the people going about their lives unaware of the danger, unaware that someone was willing to risk everything for them. That thought strengthened her resolve. She was not seeking recognition, only the chance to prevent tragedy. Communication lines were a challenge. She had to ensure that she could relay critical information without revealing her plan prematurely. She adjusted radios, set up emergency signals, and tested frequencies repeatedly. Every device was checked, every signal verified. In her mind, she ran through scenarios in which communications failed, preparing backup strategies, ensuring that no obstacle could leave her isolated in a critical moment. She wanted to be certain that if she succeeded, it would be because of skill and preparation, not luck. Her physical endurance was tested as well. Days of hard work left her body sore, and nights with little rest drained her energy. Yet she pushed forward, fueled by determination. She understood that preparation was not just about machines or maps, it was about her own ability to perform under pressure. She trained herself, running exercises to maintain focus, practicing rapid decisions, and rehearsing maneuvers mentally until they became second nature. She knew that when the moment came, hesitation could be deadly. Despite the solitude, she did not feel alone. She remembered mentors from her past, instructors who had pushed her, pilots who had flown with her, and the countless missions that had taught her resilience. Their lessons echoed in her mind, providing guidance, reassurance, and the reminder that skill honed over years could never be erased. Experience was her greatest ally, more reliable than any modern system or technology. She relied on it fully, trusting her instincts, honed reflexes, and judgment. Every evening she stood by the plane, looking at it as if it were alive. She had seen others treat it as scrap, as a machine too old to matter. But to her it was more than metal and mechanics. It represented opportunity, trust, and the chance to make a difference. She spoke softly to it sometimes, not because it needed words, but because the ritual helped focus her mind. She reminded herself that the plane and she were one team, that her skill and its capabilities had to work together perfectly. As the enemy drew closer, urgency grew. Reports suggested that the attack could begin at any moment. She accelerated her preparations, knowing there would be no second chances. Every task was done with precision and care. She double-checked every fuel line, every control surface, every navigation system. Even the smallest oversight could result in failure. She forced herself to slow down when necessary, ensuring that speed did not compromise accuracy. Preparation, she knew, was as much about patience as it was about action. She often reflected on why she had chosen this path. It was not about proving anyone wrong or showing defiance. It was about responsibility. It was about the people who could not defend themselves, the communities in harm's way, and the knowledge that if she did nothing, lives would be lost. That sense of purpose drove her past exhaustion, past doubt, past fear. She knew that courage was meaningless without action, and action required preparation, skill, and commitment. By the end of each long day, she would climb into the cockpit, run through checklists, and test the systems once more. The plane responded to her movements as if it understood the stakes. Each flight, each test run, brought her closer to readiness. She felt a growing confidence not in the plane alone, but in the combination of her skill, her preparation, and her unwavering determination. She knew that when the moment arrived, she would not falter, and through it all, she never sought recognition. No one outside her small circle of allies knew what she was doing. There were no orders, no approval, no audience to validate her actions. Yet she continued, because she understood that some responsibilities could not wait for permission. Some actions could not depend on consensus. The lives of others were at stake, and that was enough reason to act. She spent long hours alone in the hangar, surrounded by tools, spare parts, and the hum of generators. She made small notes, reminders, and sketches. She practiced emergency maneuvers in her mind, anticipating potential failures and rehearsing solutions. Every detail mattered, and nothing was left to chance. She understood that preparation was not a single moment. It was a continuous effort, a constant readiness for the moment when she would have to face the impossible. As the sun began to rise, casting pale light over the hangar, She stood back and looked at the plane. It was ready. She was ready. And even though the commanders had rejected her plan, even though the odds were against her, she felt a quiet certainty that when the time came, she could face the danger alone and give herself the chance to stop what others could not. The work had been long, the nights exhausting, and the risks enormous. But she had prepared, and preparation, she knew, was the foundation of courage. The warning alarm started early that morning. The base was buzzing with activity as new intelligence reports confirmed what she had feared. The enemy attack was imminent, faster and more coordinated than anyone had expected. Troops were moving into defensive positions, commanders were shouting orders, and helicopters patrolled the skies. She stood in the operations room, watching as plans were drawn up, communications crackled, and every attempt was made to coordinate a response. Despite all the activity, she knew that the standard defenses were too slow, too rigid, and too dependent on outdated strategies. The towns in the path of the attack had no time to wait. She felt the familiar surge of tension, but it was tempered by clarity. She had prepared for this moment for days, running through every scenario in her mind. While others relied on protocols and established plans, she relied on her skill, her instincts, and the old plane that sat ready in the hangar. It was not about proving herself anymore. It was about the people who would suffer if no one acted. Her decision was clear. She could not wait for permission. She had to move. Reports came in of enemy movements showing units advancing faster than predicted. Radar screens highlighted their path, and satellite images revealed the scale of the force. She studied each detail, noting the weaknesses, the timing, the patterns that others overlooked. The enemy assumed they would encounter standard defenses, predictable tactics, and organized resistance. They did not anticipate that someone would act alone, relying on skill, speed, and the element of surprise. That advantage, she knew, was hers to use. She returned to the hangar, heart steady, mind sharp. The plane was ready, and she felt a deep connection to it, as if the metal and steel understood the urgency of the moment. She ran through the pre-flight checklist one more time, methodically confirming every system. Fuel levels were full, weapons were armed, and communication lines were clear. Every dial, every switch, every lever responded perfectly. It was a reminder that preparation could turn fear into action, and that skill, honed over years, was a reliable tool in moments of crisis. The radio crackled with updates from the field. Units were reporting small skirmishes with enemy scouts, and the first waves of the main force were approaching faster than predicted. She listened, absorbing the information, calculating the timing. Every moment was critical. She thought about the people in the towns, their daily lives unaware that danger was approaching. Schools, markets, homes, ordinary places that would be destroyed if no one acted. That thought steeled her resolve. She could not fail. She climbed into the cockpit, the familiar scent of fuel and metal grounding her. The engine roared to life under her hands, and she ran through the takeoff procedures, every movement precise, every step deliberate. She visualized the mission in her mind, the route she would take, the maneuvers she would perform, the enemy units she would encounter. She anticipated possible failures, planned contingencies, and prepared herself mentally for the unknown. The moment she left the hangar, she would have to rely entirely on her own judgment. Takeoff was smooth, the plane responding exactly as she expected. As she climbed into the sky, the landscape spread out below her. Towns, fields, and forests stretched as far as she could see, quiet and unaware of the danger looming on the horizon. She focused on the task ahead, pushing aside fear and distraction. Every instinct, every muscle, every calculation was dedicated to the mission. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders, but it did not cripple her. It sharpened her focus. She monitored enemy movements closely, adjusting her course as needed. Radar indicated clusters of enemy vehicles and aircraft, moving in formation, confident in their advance. They did not see her, did not anticipate that an old plane piloted by a single person could intercept them. That element of surprise was her greatest advantage, and she intended to use it fully. Her hands moved with practiced precision, controlling the plane with skill born of years of training and experience. Communication with the base was tense. She relayed critical updates while maintaining secrecy about her exact position. Commanders had no idea that she had taken the initiative, and she preferred it that way. If they knew, they might try to stop her, fearing for her safety. She could not afford hesitation. She was the only one who could reach the enemy in time, and she trusted her own judgment more than anyone else's approval. As she approached the enemy lines, she studied their formation carefully. Armored vehicles, support units, and attack aircraft moved in coordinated patterns, assuming no resistance from the skies. She noted weak points in their formation, gaps that could be exploited, and timing that would allow her to act effectively. Every move had to be precise. One wrong maneuver could reveal her presence too early, giving the enemy time to react and nullifying her advantage. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with the rush of focus. She had faced dangerous situations before, but this was different. She was alone, and the stakes were higher than ever. The towns below depended on her success. She thought about the families, the children playing unaware of the approaching danger, the people who would never see the threat coming unless she acted. That thought fueled her determination, sharpening every decision. She adjusted her altitude and speed, weaving through enemy radar coverage, using the terrain to conceal her approach. Every second was calculated, every action deliberate. She imagined the enemy pilots scanning the skies, confident in their superiority, unaware of the unexpected challenge heading toward them. The element of surprise was not just tactical, it was psychological. They would never anticipate an attack from someone they considered powerless. As she closed in, she prepared for engagement. The plane, though old, was nimble, faster in tight maneuvers than any of the newer aircraft she had seen in simulations. She would use that advantage to strike quickly, disrupt their formation, and buy time for defenses to respond. Every calculation mattered. Timing, speed, and precision had to align perfectly. One mistake could lead to catastrophe. But she trusted her training, her instincts, and the bond she had with the aircraft. The first enemy unit appeared on the horizon, armored vehicles moving in line with attack helicopters patrolling above. She maneuvered the plane to a higher altitude, observing the layout. Then, with a sudden descent, she dove toward the unit, executing a calculated attack that disrupted their formation. Vehicles swerved, helicopters adjusted, and confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. Her presence had been unexpected, and the surprise gave her the upper hand. She moved quickly, striking key targets with precision. Every action was deliberate, every decision calculated in split seconds. She avoided unnecessary risks, focusing on disruption rather than destruction. Her goal was not to fight recklessly, but to create chaos that slowed the attack, buying precious time for towns and troops below. The plane responded flawlessly, every adjustment under her control, every maneuver executed with the confidence that only experience could bring. Reports from the field began to trickle in. Troops noticed the disruption, a sudden change in enemy movement that they could not explain. Confusion spread through the ranks, giving defenders an advantage they had not expected. She remained focused, ignoring fatigue and adrenaline, maintaining perfect control over the aircraft. She knew that the mission was not over until the enemy was sufficiently delayed and the towns were out of immediate danger. Enemy pilots began to react, adjusting their strategy to counter the unexpected attack. She anticipated these moves, adjusting altitude and trajectory to stay ahead. Her knowledge of flight dynamics, her intimate familiarity with the plane, and her ability to think quickly under pressure allowed her to remain a step ahead. Each maneuver was calculated, designed to maximize disruption while minimizing risk. Hours seemed to pass in minutes as she engaged with the advancing enemy. She moved from one cluster to another, striking critical points, creating confusion and slowing their advance. The towns below remained unaware of the heroism unfolding above, and she welcomed their ignorance. If they could continue their lives safely, it meant she was succeeding. Her focus never wavered, every action guided by preparation, skill, and purpose. By mid-morning, the first wave of the enemy was significantly delayed. Troops on the ground had time to reinforce positions, and evacuation efforts were underway. Communication channels buzzed with reports of unexpected resistance, but they did not yet know it was a single pilot in an old plane creating the disruption. She remained vigilant, watching the skies and the terrain, ready to adjust her tactics as the enemy adapted. Even in the midst of action, she found clarity. Fear and doubt had no place in her mind. Every decision was informed by knowledge, preparation, and instinct. She understood the stakes and accepted them fully. She was alone, yes, but she was capable, trained, and ready. The plane and she were one, working seamlessly together to achieve the impossible. As the sun climbed higher, she began to see the results of her actions. The enemy advance had slowed, their formations broken, their confidence shaken. Her plan, though unconventional and dismissed by many, was working. Yet she knew there was more to do. The battle was not over and the towns remained at risk. Her focus remained unwavering. Every action deliberate, every decision guided by the knowledge that the sky was alive with movement. Enemy aircraft swept across the horizon. Armored vehicles churned through fields below and the air was thick with tension. She remained calm, hands steady on the controls, eyes scanning the distance, mind working faster than any machine could. The hours of preparation, the long nights repairing the plane, the constant study of enemy tactics, all of it had led to this moment. She was alone, and yet she had never felt more ready. She adjusted her altitude and angle, staying just beyond the enemy's detection range. Her old plane, nimble and responsive, allowed her to weave through clouds, dodge radar sweeps, and approach targets from angles the enemy did not anticipate. She knew the danger. Modern jets with advanced weapons patrolled the skies, and even a small mistake could mean disaster. But she trusted her instincts, honed from years of flying and the bond she had formed with the plane during preparation. They moved as one, every maneuver precise and purposeful. As she approached the first cluster of enemy vehicles, she calculated her strike carefully. The vehicles were advancing in formation, confident, unaware that a single pilot in an outdated plane was about to disrupt their advance. She dove from above, engine roaring, and her movements were so precise that the enemy had no time to react. Tires spun in dust, engines rattled, and for a brief moment the enemy's confidence wavered. Her goal was not total destruction, but disruption, creating chaos that would slow their advance and give the towns below time to prepare. She moved on to the next group, banking sharply, dodging incoming fire, and positioning herself for maximum effect. The enemy scrambled, unsure of how to respond. Their formations broke, communications became frantic, and their advance slowed. Every maneuver she executed was calculated to force errors, to exploit weaknesses, and to buy time. Her old plane, dismissed by many as obsolete, became a weapon of precision in her hands. The sun beat down, reflecting off the metal surfaces of planes and vehicles. She adjusted her course, carefully monitoring the positions of enemy units and the response from her own side. Reports from the ground indicated that towns had begun evacuating, roads were being cleared, and defensive positions were being reinforced. Her actions were creating space for others to act, and that knowledge strengthened her resolve. She was no longer just a pilot. She was a shield, a moving barrier between danger and those who could not defend themselves. Enemy pilots became more aggressive, attempting to flush her out. Missiles streaked through the sky and tracer rounds flashed past her wings. She executed a series of evasive maneuvers, weaving and rolling, letting the plane respond with agility that modern jets could not match in close quarters. Every movement required perfect timing, every decision made in seconds. Fear pressed at the edges of her mind, but she pushed it aside. She had trained for this moment. She had prepared for this moment, and now she could not fail. Her attacks were precise, hitting key targets and creating gaps in the enemy advance. Vehicles collided, helicopters veered off course, and soldiers scrambled to adjust. Confusion spread through the ranks, and the psychological impact of a lone, unexpected adversary in the skies began to take hold. She exploited every opening, anticipating reactions, adjusting altitude, speed, and trajectory with split-second precision. Her preparation and instincts combined to create a performance of skill and courage unlike anything the enemy expected. Time seemed to stretch and compress all at once. Minutes felt like hours, yet the clock was relentless. She had to maintain focus, constantly monitoring the situation, planning her next move, and responding to unforeseen threats. Her heart pounded not with fear but with clarity. She was fully present in the moment, each action guided by preparation, experience, and purpose. Every twist, turn, and dive brought her closer to achieving what others had said was impossible. She found herself over a narrow valley where the enemy had concentrated their forces, believing it to be a safe route. She took advantage of the terrain, flying low and fast, using hills and ridges to shield her approach. Her old plane moved with astonishing responsiveness, banking sharply to avoid fire and gain better positioning. From this angle, she could disrupt multiple units at once, forcing chaos that would ripple through the enemy ranks. The skill and trust between pilot and plane were evident in every maneuver, each one executed with confidence and precision. The first wave of enemy reinforcements appeared, faster jets moving in to counter her assault. She analyzed their speed, formation, and armament, adjusting her approach. She did not attack recklessly. She knew that survival required careful planning and timing. She banked sharply, dodged incoming fire, and positioned herself to strike the most critical targets. The enemy jets were faster and more advanced, but her agility, knowledge of terrain, and element of surprise allowed her to stay one step ahead. Every move she made forced the enemy to adapt, creating hesitation and confusion. The psychological impact of a lone pilot in an old plane was undeniable. Commanders on both sides struggled to understand the disruption, and for the towns below, every second of delay meant safety. Her focus never wavered. Each attack, each maneuver, each observation was deliberate, calculated, and precise. She was fully immersed in the mission, knowing that courage and skill alone could carry her through. She flew over rivers, forests, and open fields, using every natural feature to conceal her presence and maximize her advantage. Enemy units struggled to respond effectively, their formations broken, their morale shaken. Vehicles stalled, helicopters veered off course, and soldiers below began to hesitate. She had created a gap that allowed her to control the pace of the attack, guiding it away from the towns and into zones where their impact would be minimized. Her concentration was absolute. Hours of mental rehearsal, physical preparation, and tactical analysis converged in a seamless flow of action. She calculated trajectories, adjusted altitude, and anticipated enemy reactions with split-second timing. Fatigue crept in, but she ignored it, relying on muscle memory, training, and the bond she had formed with her aircraft. Every sense was heightened, every decision critical, every moment a test of skill and courage. She executed a daring maneuver, diving through a narrow canyon to strike at the center of an enemy formation. Missiles fired past her, engines roared, and the wind screamed in her ears. She moved with precision, striking key targets and forcing the enemy to scatter. Vehicles overturned, communications faltered, and the attack lost momentum. Her actions were changing the course of the engagement, and she knew it. But she also knew that her mission was not complete. Towns were still at risk, and she could not afford to relax. As she climbed back into the sky, she observed the wider battlefield. Enemy forces were scattered, their formations disrupted, and reinforcements delayed. Her actions had created space for the defenders on the ground, allowing them to organize and respond more effectively. Communication channels buzzed with updates, reports of unexpected resistance and confusion among enemy ranks. The effectiveness of her plan was becoming clear, even if those on the ground did not yet know who was responsible. She pressed on, relentless in her efforts. She avoided unnecessary risk, focusing on disruption, timing, and precision. Her objective was clear: buy time, disrupt formations, and protect the towns below. Every maneuver, every calculation, every decision was guided by preparation, experience, and the knowledge that failure was not an option. She felt a sense of calm in the chaos, a focus sharpened by hours of preparation and years of experience. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the landscape. Fatigue weighed on her body, but she continued, driven by purpose. She had disrupted the enemy advance, scattered their forces, and created opportunities for others to act. Her old plane, once dismissed as obsolete, had become a tool of precision and courage. She moved with confidence, knowing that her preparation and skill were making a difference in real time. Even in the heat of action, she remained aware of the towns below. Schools, homes, markets, ordinary places now protected by her efforts in the sky. She thought of the people who had no idea of the danger they had narrowly avoided, and that thought strengthened her resolve. She was not seeking recognition, only the satisfaction that her actions had made a difference. Each maneuver, each strike, each calculated risk was a step toward ensuring their safety. As the evening approached, she began to see the results of her actions more clearly. Enemy formations were broken, reinforcements delayed, and the towns had time to evacuate and reinforce defenses. Her mission was far from over, but the momentum had shifted. The impossible task she had undertaken alone was now showing signs of success. She felt a quiet pride not in herself, but in the lives she was protecting and the impact of careful, deliberate action. She prepared for the final moves of the day, knowing that the enemy would attempt to regroup and counterattack. She studied their positions, calculated trajectories, and adjusted her approach. Every movement was deliberate, precise, and informed by preparation. Fatigue and adrenaline warred within her, But she remained focused, trusting in her skill, her experience, and the bond she had formed with her aircraft. As night began to fall, the first signs of real success emerged. Enemy units were scattered, communication breakdowns were evident, and TT,